Every once in a while, I like to take a break from playing 80-hour JRPGs that take me months to finish and play something smaller. A while back, I tried the demo for a game called AI Limit, an anime Souls-like that seemed interesting enough to try when it went on sale, even though my previous experience with anime Souls-likes in Code Vein was not exactly positive. One of the things that pushed me over the edge to buying it is how insanely high the Steam reviews were, although I didn't find out until much later that basically all of the reviews were from Chinese players. This contrasted pretty hilariously with the hosts of 4s and 5s out of 10 that it had gotten from major publications, and that type of dissonance in reception always interests me. So I want to talk about why this game ended up being pretty damn good, what it does well and does poorly, and what sort of person this game is for. Let's dive into Weeb Souls. Hello, my name is Ian Bits. I talk about video games. If you enjoy this content, please subscribe and consider leaving a comment. Thank you. The history of Souls-likes outside of FromSoft titles is long and full of disappointments, but one of the ones that stands out to me as especially disappointing is Code Vein, a Souls-like from Bandai Namco with an anime art style. I'm sure some people liked it more than me, but it felt horrendously balanced, which is kind of a death sentence for the genre. It sort of assumed you were bringing along NPC companions everywhere, and I tend to dislike that in Souls-likes. It turns a lot of fights into being less about tense engagements with dangerous enemies, and more about abusing the poor AI to fuck around with their aggro. So I played through most of it solo, but in that instance, the bosses had massively inflated health pools that made the entire thing a slog. It was just extremely bland from a visual and environmental perspective. A lot of boring or overly uniform areas, with the cathedral being a particularly infamous example. There were some good ideas there, namely the class system, but it just didn't pull them off. On the surface, and in actuality, AI Limit has some of those same issues. However, it has things that Code Vein doesn't. A clear purpose and place within the subgenre, and one or two things that it does as well as any Souls-like out there. AI Limit is an action RPG made by Chinese developer Sense Games as their debut title. It's tough to nail down exactly how big this studio is, but considering the other games from the publisher, I imagine it's likely indie or at most AA. You play as a Blader, a sort of AI robot humanoid thing. I'm not really sure, it was kind of unclear, but they're all anime women. You are tasked with linking all of the trees in order to achieve some nebulous goal, although in reality your goal is just to wander around killing big demon things, while NPC interactions and some environmental storytelling tell you what you're actually doing and what the state of the world actually is. The story itself starts off slow, but by the end I was honestly pretty impressed by how interesting they'd made the lore of the world, and how well they'd established some underlying conflict that was just on the border of being incomprehensible, but just grounded enough to be understood. I will say, as with many games in the genre, a good chunk of the storytelling is told through optional NPC interactions and quest lines. I give the game a lot of credit for making these interactions available until a very late point of no return. I missed plenty as I went through, but you can and should use a guide to see all of these because of how much they flesh out the world. You also need to complete certain ones in order to face the true final boss, so I'd recommend going back and doing everything as you feel like you're approaching the end. The world is surprisingly interesting despite what is, in my opinion, the worst part of the game, which is the visual and environmental design. AI Limit is working with an advantage right out of the gate. The anime art style is both instantly recognizable and leaves a lot of room to get really weird with stuff without feeling out of place. You can also inject a lot of color because at the end of the day, while it allows for serious tones to be explored, the style is inherently a cartoon. Neither color nor creativity is present here, and it's a big missed opportunity. The areas you visit consist of a bunch of sewers, some residential areas that are in love with the color gray, a train station that feels like a sewer, a pretty standard and bland cathedral, one standout area which uses weird technology with clashing blues and reds, and of course a poison swamp, which is nature's sewer. It's frustrating. It starts off in a visually uninteresting sewer and for some reason keeps trying to return to said sewer again and again. The residential areas feel very gamey in the sense that they're just buildings without doors stacked next to each other. The train station is tremendously boring, and the poison swamp is once again way too bland and uniform from a color standpoint. These feel like inorganic locations, like they don't exist as part of a world but just as paths for you to travel, which would be fine, but if you're going in that direction, at least get weird with it. The standout area is the one with the giant techno eyeball, which we'll talk more about later. And honestly, if a few more areas of the game were up to that standard, it would legitimately take this game from a 7 out of 10 to like a 9 out of 10. It's a glaring and frustrating weakness considering the NPC interactions do enough to draw you into the world. It just can't make that last step towards greatness witness visually. As you might expect, journeying through this sewer-laden land involves killing a lot of demons and mechs, so let's touch on the combat. It plays things relatively safe, but it executes certain things well and puts enough of its own twists in there that I would say it ranks on the higher end of indie Souls-likes out there. First, the basics. Light and heavy on right bumper and triggers, a unique special move tied to each weapon, blocking, parrying, dodging, all of the classics. The big thing you'll notice is similar to Sekiro and Wo Long, there's no stamina bar here. Dodging and attacking can be done infinitely with no penalty, and the only thing preventing you from mashing right bumper to kill every enemy is some less generous than usual stagger points and delays baked into animations. To replace it, AI Limit has something called a sync bar. This ranges from 0 to 100, going up as you land attacks on an enemy and going down as you either get hit or use an ability that costs some of your meter. This is the central mechanic to the game and the main differentiator between it and something like Dark Souls or Lies of P. As a general rule, the higher your sync rate is, the higher your damage. This can vary based on equipment, but basically means that getting hit lowers your damage and chaining hits with dodges means your offense stays strong. The most important way to use the sync meter though is as a pseudo MP bar for your abilities. The weapon abilities attached to each item as well as various spells cost sync rate, so you're getting a burst of damage while needing to keep on the offensive to get your damage back up afterwards. Crucially, some of the basic abilities I mentioned like blocking and parrying as well as a precision dodge are linked to sync rate instead of the traditional stamina. This means failed uses require active responses instead of passive ones. If you miss a parry, you can't just back up and regroup, you need to earn your damage bonus back. Now, as cool as this is, it does have some issues in implementation. In general, the damage bonus from sync rate isn't huge, so it's not a huge deal if you stay at lower levels for prolonged stretches in boss fights. The abilities also generally cost way too much sync, considering many of them also have an extremely long wind-up animation associated. That means you're probably taking damage just to get them off in the first place. I do like that linking it to the parry means the game avoids becoming like Lies of P or Sekiro, in that you're expected to do long drawn-out parry chains. But operating on Bloodborne and Dark Souls parry logic, in which one parry will immediately stagger the enemy and allow for a critical attack, makes certain fights and bosses completely trivial. This isn't unique to this game. I remember realizing how easy the final boss of Dark Souls was when I figured out you could just parry him, but it's unfortunate that it's present here nonetheless. The big thing is that dodging is just really damn powerful and there isn't enough of a downside for spamming it. I feel like hitboxes and dodge timings for enemy attacks were quite generous, and since the recovery time for dodges is pretty quick as well, you're often not punished for making a mistake. This feeds into difficulty, which we'll talk about in depth more soon, but I think it can lean two-player friendly sometimes. These are issues that just need tweaks and polishing around a solid system, but considering how standard the base combat is and the rest of the game systems are, said issues are magnified. It uses the same weapon upgrade system, similar stat and level up systems, and has an extremely similar pace as most FromSoft titles. This is fine in some senses, but I just wish the sync meter was executed better. As it stands, I think the gameplay is still well above average because there's a good amount of polish present with the core combat and animations, but much like the atmosphere, it wound up just a little bit short of taking that next step. Let's shift gears and talk about the real strengths of the game. There are two things that jump out to me regarding AI Limit. Two things that I really want to commend this game for getting right. One is something that will basically interest anyone who likes the genre, and the other is a bit more specialized. Let's start with the latter. One of the more notable things about the Souls-like genre is that it's gotten quite a bit more difficult over the years. As games need to now maintain difficulty and tension in a genre that people have gotten better and better at, they've become less and less accessible to new players. If you're deep in the genre, you maybe haven't even realized this has happened, but compare more recent FromSoft titles like Sekiro and Elden Ring to Demon's Souls. It's kind of night and day. Demon's Souls really isn't that bad when you go back to it, but because newer games keep having to move the bar, it's approached the point where it's kind of excessive. The first thing that really seemed like it crossed the bar for me was the Elden Ring DLC, which inflated health pools and trivialized build choices to the point where I really felt like the genre needed to look at itself and reset. AI Limit, by virtue of coming from a region where Souls-likes are less widespread, and having an art style aimed at people who may not be as interested in the grim Western fantasy-inspired Dark Souls, feels like it is comfortably reset. That's the first strength of this game. If you are new to Souls-likes, or even if you never tried them before at all, AI Limit Limit is a great starting point. I don't mean this to say the game is easy, because it isn't. Compared to a lot of modern Souls-likes, you're pretty limited on healing early on, and even as a seasoned vet, I still had some problems in a few areas, but it seems to make a conscious effort to never make things unfair, never make them overwhelming. I found myself first trying a lot of the bosses as well. It feels like most of them have a completely reasonable amount of health and a completely reasonable moveset, and it's great for new players. This is very reminiscent of something like Dark Souls 1 and 2, in that if you're doing the right things build-wise and keeping your weapon upgrades up to date, nothing is going to feel out of reach. There's something to be said about over-intense difficulty and the anxiety it can bring to an experience. I'm playing Wuchang right now, and that's a huge part of the appeal of that game to me. Still, it's important to remember that a lot of people who would otherwise be interested in the genre feel frozen out by horror stories or constant escalation. AI Limit feels fair. It feels designed for people to dip their toes in and see if they like the genre. It's harder than 95% of games out there, but it's far closer to those earlier FromSoft titles. There's also a lot of little ways in which it helps out difficulty-wise. Instead of needing to get your bloodstain back after a death, you just lose a percentage of your souls. This is actually going to be worse for veterans like me who would rather have the opportunity to just get them back, but it means new players don't risk massive, irrecuperable losses each time they hit a difficulty spike. There's also the lack of need for stamina management and somewhat generous boss hitboxes that I mentioned earlier. Checkpoints are paced reasonably enough, but still put some challenge in getting there with limited healing. You can respec at any time, enemy movesets are entirely fair, it's just really well balanced overall. They resisted the urge to turn the dial up to 11 when most games are trying to get to 12. It also introduces people really well to one of the main appeals of the genre by making a decent chunk of the difficulty come from unique level features like the previously mentioned Poison Swamp, unique level gimmicks, or bottomless pits. And that brings us to the number one absolute best part of the game, and the reason, despite some of its other issues, I'm going to recommend it here. The level design in this game is absolutely brilliant. Let's go through the levels here. It'll mostly be general stuff, but if you want to experience all of it blind, here's a spoiler warning. You start off in a sewer, which is a pretty basic level to ease the player in. There's some simple shortcuts as it loops back around on itself, secret areas that you can drop down to or hidden behind some boxes, and a robot shooting lasers that you need to dodge before circling around and killing him by smacking his fingers. Then you're up into a sandy residential area that starts off pretty bland, just some straight paths with people sniping you, but slowly morphs into you traversing rooftops and zip lines, dodging between enemy gangs staking out their territory. This is a vertical level that sort of hides how vertical it is through the use of zip lines. This tends to be a common theme here. If you're someone who likes when these sorts of games use vertical space well, I can pretty much guarantee you'll enjoy this game. It leads into a level shortly after where verticality is more direct, with narrow walkways and bottomless pits to contend with. There's another level in the mid-game, unfortunately also a sewer, that really pushes you in terms of how to use your healing. The Poison Swamp does the same thing, but then it morphs into these elevated bridges and walkways that you have to slowly navigate. There's a flooded area where everything blends together visually, challenging you to make a mental map in your head in case you die, while placing some non-respawning mini-bosses that push you towards that death. Some levels are pretty basic, but I think that's fine. The cathedral levels are pretty focused on combat, and are placed at spots in the game where a break to just focus on that is welcome. The train station levels never did much for me, but hidden within these are insanely long and optional side paths that lead to brand new optional areas. I'm legitimately shocked how much some of this stuff is not just missable, but hidden away so well that you feel like you're stumbling across some place you aren't meant to find. They did such a fantastic job of rewarding exploration not just through items and experience, but through the satisfaction of uncovering secrets within a strange world. That brings us to the big one, the best level in the game and a culmination of all of these things. It also happens to be that one area I mentioned earlier where the visual design really stands out, making it by far the highlight of the game. It uses verticality, forcing you to drop down laser grid platforms as you delve deeper and deeper into a mysterious facility. It has hidden paths, including one set right next to a checkpoint that's unreachable because of a laser wall, taunting you to explore the level to fully reach it. It freshens up both combat and exploration through a gimmick in the form of an all-seeing eye, which will slowly build up a massive attack at you when you're out in the open, similar to the Frenzy Brain at the end of Bloodborne. It takes what would otherwise be simple exploration and combat encounters and forces you to think harder about how to approach them. It's the perfect example of how these guys knew what they were doing with level design, and my only qualm with it is that I wish it was a little bit longer. So it's kind of odd that I would make a video on this. It's not the genre I usually cover here, it came out 6 months ago, and this isn't some 10 out of 10 unmissable masterpiece. One of the things that frustrates me about video game coverage on YouTube, especially with indie or niche games, is it becomes very polarized. People want you to think everything that reviewed average or poor from some game journos that didn't know what they were talking about is just hidden perfection or total garbage. I think that's why I wanted to talk about this. It really strikes me as a game that certain people are going to really enjoy, but it's tough for those people to really get accurate information on some niche game like this, especially considering so many of the reviews and guides for it aren't in English. So that's why I made this. If you or someone you know wants to jump into the Souls-like genre and is looking for a good onboarding point, here's AI Limit. If you or someone you know really cares about level design and especially likes when verticality is used well, here's AI Limit. If you don't fall into those categories but still like Souls-likes, consider checking it out if it goes on a particularly good sale, or if you're in the mood for a solid, competent overall experience. It's not going to change your life, but it does some things really goddamn well, and I think it deserves credit for that. Thanks for watching. Again, please subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I don't have a Patreon or anything, but there is a Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. The next video on this channel will be Trails in the Sky FC in September.